In this video, I'm going to be making a cozy farming district for my Minecraft village. And because I'm feeling crazy, I'll also be attempting one of my biggest terraforming projects ever, all in hardcore Minecraft. Without wasting any time, I repaired my shovel and then got to work flattening an area behind our existing builds. Unfortunately, I ran into a bunch of stone, which was a bit annoying to remove, but once it was all gone, I replaced it with grass blocks to give us a nice big area to work on. The first thing I want to build is a wool farm, since I'm going to need a lot of it for the huge terraforming project I have in mind for this episode. We're going to need a decent amount of materials to build the wool farm though, so I first went over to our villager trading hall and exchanged some iron for emeralds and then used those to buy some bricks from a mason. Back at our house, I used bone meal to create glow lichen, which I harvested with some shears. After that, I crafted a bunch of the redstone materials like hoppers, observers, and comparators. Continuing with the resource grind, I stripped down some logs and then crafted some copper trapdoors. I want the trapdoors to age down though, so I placed them outside with 4 block gaps in between them. Once they reach the second stage of oxidation, I'll need to wax them so that they don't age down any further. We're also going to need some dark oak wood, so I planted a few trees near the trapdoors. After that, I placed some gray concrete powder in the water in order to convert it into regular concrete, which I then collected with my pickaxe. Heading over to the barn next, I used my shears to get some white wool from our sheep. I then went over to our villager trading hall again and bought some bows from the Fletcher. Using the bows, I crafted 17 dispensers. I then made a trip down into the mine as we need a few stacks of deep slate. After mining some up, I went back to the surface, checked on our trapdoors, and waxed and collected the ones that were ready. I also noticed our dark oak trees grew, so I spent a couple minutes chopping them down. Using the wood we just collected, I crafted a stack of stairs as well as slabs. The last item I need is blackstone, so it's time for a trip to the nether. To make it a bit safer though, I took a minute to brew some fire resistance potions. With those in hand, I geared up a bit and then made my way into the scary nether. As I was searching for some blackstone, I came across a warped forest for the first time, so I took the opportunity to collect a bunch of the mushrooms and roots since I think they could be fun to decorate our base with. Anyways, after searching for a bit longer, I found a basalt deltas biome, which actually granted me an advancement called Hot Tourist Destinations. That was a pretty cool epic gamer moment, but I'm more interested in the blackstone, so after fighting off some magma cubes and taking my fire resistance potion, I got to work mining a bunch up. And it's definitely a good thing we made some potions because I ran into a lot of lava while digging. I gathered about 7 stacks of blackstone, which should be more than enough, so I made my way back to the overworld. Finally, in the safety of our house, I turned the blackstone into a variety of different stairs and slabs. I'm just a few copper trapdoors short since they're still aging, but besides that, we now have every single block that we need to build the wool farm. I think it'll be easiest if we make the farm first and then the building after, so I began by creating some stalls for the sheep using glass blocks. After that, I placed a dispenser behind all of the stalls, followed by some observers which will detect when the sheep eat grass. After connecting things up with some redstone, I went underneath the farm and built the collection system. I'm a total redstone noob, but basically the way that it works is that a hopper minecart will pick up all of the wool, and then it'll be transported to a chest on the surface using hoppers and a dropper elevator. Now that all of the redstone is in place, let's head over to our barn and start moving some sheep over. After bringing a few sheep to the farm, I very painfully nudged them into their stalls. It's most likely just a skill issue, but this took me way too long. I did notice the rest of the trapdoors already as I was moving more sheep over though, so that's nice at least. Anyways, I toughed it out and eventually managed to fill all 17 stalls with a sheep. Now that they're all in place, I dyed all of the sheep light gray and then placed a pair of shears inside all of the dispensers. And with that, the farm should be fully functional. We can see that it's working since wool is starting to appear inside of the chest. That's absolutely awesome, but let's not waste any time and get straight to covering up the farm with a brand new building. For this one, I used primarily tough blocks and deep slate for the walls, and then created support beams using stripped spruce and oak logs. I tried making the roof a bit more interesting by creating one section out of blackstone and the other section out of dark oak and spruce. But of course, the build is really going to come alive with the smaller details, so I first added a lantern near the entrance and then a couple of flowers in front of the windows. After that, I added a few melons, which I detailed with some sea pickles and candles to look like larger stems. I detailed the back of the build with more lanterns, as well as oak leaves with some flower pots on top of them. I also created a small wood pile using oak logs and extinguished campfires, and then for a pop of color, I added a few rose bushes. For the final wall, I added yet another flower pot, and then created a large pile of hay as a bit of storytelling as to how the sheep are fed. Last but not least, I created a patch of coarse dirt at the open entrance to give it a bit of a barn aesthetic. With that, the exterior of the wool farm is finished, and I have to say it's looking pretty dang cool. As for the interior, I decided to keep it pretty simple, so I'll just go ahead and show you the finished result. Also, let's check out how much wool the farm produced while we were busy building. Looks like we got just over 7 stacks, which is absolutely awesome since I'm going to need a lot for the terraforming project. My plan is to use the wool along with several other blocks to create large boulders around the island. First things first though, I need to repair my pickaxe since it's nearly about to break. While I was at it, I also added mending, which should be super useful once we get a proper XP farm set up. With my tools ready to go, I went full deforestation mode and chopped down nearly every single tree on the island. I really just want to get a clear view of the terrain so that I can better plan out the terraforming. It was a bit tedious, but I got all of the trees cleared. I mean, at least we have a massive supply of logs now, and I also found a few beehives, so that's a nice bonus. What's not so nice is that past me wasn't exactly thinking ahead, as I didn't really plan out where our paths would go as we kept expanding the island. After giving it some thought, I think our best bet is to remove both the sugarcane and melon farms. I don't exactly love tearing down builds, but I think this will make our base much more functional and better looking in the long run. At least we have a great starting point for our big terraforming project now, but before we can actually start, we need to do some resource gathering. I first spent about 20 minutes or so gathering a bunch of deep slate and tough blocks. After that, I found some andesite and mined a few stacks of that as well. Once my inventory was completely full, I made my way back to the surface. We're also going to need a ton of dirt, grass, and stone, but luckily I already have multiple chests full inside of my storage room. I also think adding a bit of acacia logs will look nice, so I grew some with some bone meal and then chopped them all down. Last but not least, we can grab all of the light gray wool from our brand new farm. That was a bit of a grind, but I'm hoping that these will be enough materials for our terraforming project. Now that we finally have everything that we need, I got straight to building. This is definitely one of the biggest terraforming projects I've ever attempted in survival, so I decided to break it down into different sections to make it a bit more manageable. Essentially, my idea is to create large boulders and then build up the ground around them. Our old villager breeder ended up getting in the way, so I decided to just remove it. I still might want to use the villagers in the future though, so I think I'm just going to leave them in a hole in the ground. Anyways, for the boulders themselves, I used a combination of deep slate, tough, acacia logs, stone, andesite, and just a tiny bit of coal ore. And I did my best to keep the darker blocks in areas where shadows would naturally fall to give the terrain more depth. I continued the same building technique around most of the island, and I made sure to place torches underneath the new terrain just so that we don't create a giant mob spawner underneath the island. I got in a pretty good flow and just shut my brain off for a while and grinded away on the project for close to 4 hours. But of course, just as I was almost finished, I completely ran out of both dirt and grass blocks, and to make things worse, my shovel was pretty much at 0 durability. I resorted to breaking down some ore I had in our storage room, as well as trading with villagers to get some XP, and then I fully repaired my shovel. With that issue sorted, I went underneath our new terrain and gathered several stacks of grass blocks. With that in hand, I finished filling in the last section. To see if all this time and effort was worth it, let's take a look at the before and after. It's seriously such an insane change. To celebrate finishing this massive terraforming project, let's go check in on my cats. I'll also take this moment to remind you to like and subscribe. I truly do appreciate all the support lately, it means the world to me. Getting back to Minecraft, the next thing I want to build is a new pumpkin and melon farm since I feel bad about tearing down our old one. I already have most of the materials I need, but I am missing just a few things, so I grew more glow lichen, filled a couple of water buckets, and stopped by our moss farm to collect both regular and pale moss. With that in hand, I got started by building the perimeter of the farm using cobblestone, tuff, and pale moss to create a stone wall of sorts. Next, I extended our pathway to the farm entrance using coarse dirt. To add some extra detail, I decorated the wall with oak leaves, grass, and a few flowers. And to help prevent mobs from spawning, I also dotted some glow lichen along the wall. I then dug holes for the water sources and filled them in with mangrove roots before waterlogging them with my buckets. After that, I tilled the ground in a diagonal pattern to create clean, organized rows for the melons. And to stop them from growing in unwanted spots, I used moss carpet as a barrier. With a few final details in place, I was really happy with how everything was coming together, so I planted both pumpkins and melons in alternating rows. Once they're fully grown, I think it's going to look super satisfying. For my next build, I want to create some custom trees, but before I can do that, I need more materials. So I first went underground and mined some diorite and granite. With that in hand, I crafted a variety of different walls, which we can use for the trunks of the trees. I then used bone meal on a rooted dirt block in order to make some hanging roots, which I think will be fun to decorate the trees with. The last thing I need is a buttload of leaves, so I planted some birch saplings and grew them right away with some bone meal. I then used my shears to gather all of the leaves. I repeated the same process 2 more times for both spruce and oak leaves, and with that, we should have all the materials we need to build some custom trees. I started by making a small spruce tree behind our starter house, then gave it a happy birch tree friend. Since I liked how those turned out, I added another birch tree along with 2 more spruce trees behind our horse stable and blacksmith. Higher up on the hill, I built 2 more birch trees, and then I created a couple more beside our wool farm. Next to our villager trading hall, I built 1 more birch tree, and then to switch things up a little bit, I created a large oak tree, which I think turned out pretty cool. I even used the hanging roots we gathered earlier to add more detail. All in all, these trees brought so much life to the area, so I'm definitely going to keep adding more as we continue expanding the island. On the topic of expanding, that's exactly what I want to do next, so I got to work digging out the ground to make room for a new pathway. Once I was happy with the shape, I filled it in primarily with coarse dirt, and to add some texture variation, I used my go-to mix of regular dirt, packed mud, and granite. While I was working, a creeper snuck up behind me, and I almost had a heart attack when I heard it explode. Luckily, I didn't die and lose the world, because I definitely would have cried. Anyway, I patched up the hole and finished detailing the path. With the new pathway in place, this new region is feeling so much more established. I think it would be super fun to add a sunflower farm to the region, but I don't have very many, so I went on a quick adventure to find some. Fortunately, there were a ton nearby, so I was easily able to collect a couple of stacks in no time. Close to where I found the sunflowers is a cherry blossom biome, which I've been meaning to check out for the longest time. So I finally went over, chopped down a few trees, and gathered some saplings. Something else I've been procrastinating checking out is this ruined nether portal, so I took a minute to loot that as well. The chest was pretty lackluster, but at least there were a few gold blocks ripe for the taking. With a few goodies in hand, I made my way back to our base. I'm constantly running out of bone meal, so I headed over to the windmill and went down into the basement to run our moss farms. While we let those run, I built 2 additional bone meal farms next to our existing one. Once they were set up, I filled them with the moss we just generated. While everything was processing, I took a minute to farm some glow lichen. After producing a little bit of bone meal, I think we're finally ready to build the sunflower farm. I started by adding some variety to the ground with moss blocks before planting rows of sunflowers. Once all the sunflowers were in place, I spawn-proofed the area a bit by adding some glow lichen. To make the space feel more natural, I also dotted some shortgrass around. I think it would be fun to enclose the area by creating a small wall. After creating some pillars, I filled in the gaps using azalea bushes. And for just a bit more height, I placed some moss carpet on top of them. I'm seriously so happy we built this sunflower farm, it adds so much color to the area. I'm trying to make this world feel as alive and fun to explore as possible, so I took a minute to add armor to some of the armor stands we have scattered around. And since this is hardcore, I'm also trying to make it as safe as possible, so I hid more lighting under the ground using torches and moss carpet. I want to continue upgrading our gear, so I think it's about time we take on a Bastion and find a netherite upgrade template. In preparation, I brewed more fire resistance potions and repaired my bow. With those, along with a few other supplies, I headed into the nether in search of a Bastion. After searching for a while, I finally found one. I carefully began looting the structure, staying extra cautious of brutes. Those things seriously terrify me. While searching for a template, I ended up finding my very first netherite scrap. After looting every single chest in the Bastion, I unfortunately didn't find a template. Still determined, I made my way back home, dropped off my loot, brewed more potions, and set out to find a second Bastion. Along the way, I collected some crimson roots and fungus while I had the chance. After some time, I found another one that we can take on. I carefully took out all of the brutes I could spot before searching for loot chests. And in one of the first ones that I opened, I found a snout armor trim and, more importantly, a netherite upgrade template. I did my best to locate every chest, and I also tried finding all of the hidden gold blocks. This was definitely worth the effort, as I found a second netherite upgrade as well as 2 ancient debris. Once I was pretty sure that I looted everything, I decided to make my way back home. Along the way though, I spotted a fortress I haven't explored yet, which I couldn't resist exploring. And I'm really glad that I did, since I found a rib armor trim template. After that awesome find, I finally got back to our portal and went back to the overworld. I'm honestly so relieved to be back in the overworld, as I was on edge that entire time. Anyways, after organizing my items a bit, here's a look at all of the loot we obtained. After smelting the ancient debris we found, I have enough netherite scrap to upgrade one item, which is really exciting. I think I want to upgrade a pickaxe first, so I got a brand new one from a villager and then added a few books to it in order to create the perfect pick. With that in hand, I crafted a netherite ingot and then upgraded the pickaxe using one of the templates we found. I'm feeling really motivated to go find more ancient debris, so I crafted a bunch of beds, brewed more fire resistance potions, and made my way back into the nether. And I kid you not, as I was staircasing underground to set up for bed mining, I accidentally bumped into some ancient debris. That was super lucky, and it didn't stop there, as the very first bed that I exploded revealed even more debris. I'm by no means complaining though, since the more we can find, the better. I continued mining by exploding more beds, which is the fastest way I know how to do this besides using TNT. Once I used up all of the beds, I resorted to just regular strip mining, which also turned out to be pretty effective. My pickaxe durability began getting low, and I only had 1 fire resistance potion left, so I figured that was my sign to go back home. I ended up getting 26 ancient debris in about 45 minutes of mining, so I think we can safely say that was a success. I put it all in a furnace, and while we wait for it to smelt, let's go break down all of the quartz ore that I collected while mining, since I basically have 0 XP right now. It's a little eerie being so high up like this, but we do have a really cool view of our island. After mining all of the quartz, I managed to get up to level 17, which is pretty good. All of the debris was done smelting, and I ended up having enough scrap to craft 6 netherite ingots. I also duplicated our last upgrade template a bunch of times, since we'll need some of those too. Using the levels I got from mining the quartz, I added mending to all of my armor. I then went ahead and upgraded our entire armor set to netherite, which granted me the Cover Me in Debris achievement. I also upgraded our sword, which is awesome, but I think we'll save our last ingot for some time in the future. However, I did use one of the snout armor trims we found in a Bastion on my boots, which has us looking absolutely dripped out now. I'm super glad we're more geared up now, but I'm in the mood to get back to some building. So I started by getting a few items together that I'll need to create a brand new path. The block palette for this path is going to be quite different from our others, so I'll need to get some bricks from our mason villagers. With those in hand, I went down to the dock and took our boat down the river over to a nearby mesa biome. Once I arrived, I spent a few minutes gathering up a bunch of regular terracotta. I'm hoping that's all the blocks I'm going to need, so I made my way back home. Heading over to the build site, I'm going to be creating a path from the villager trading hall over to our new wool farm. And I also decided to create a network of paths that will eventually take us to a bunch of future builds. For the path itself, I used stone brick stairs to create a border and then began filling in the rest with bricks, granite, and terracotta. While I was at it, I also spent a few minutes extending the vineyard we built last episode to better align with our new pathway. The next thing that I want to build in this new area is a pergola, so I began crafting all the items that I'm going to need. For some reason, I'm using 84 campfires, which is a little crazy, but I think it'll be worth it. The only item that I want to use that I'm missing is weeping vines, so I made a quick trip to the nether. I already know where a crimson forest is from our previous adventure, so it didn't take me very long to find some at all. And with that, we should have all the materials that we're going to need to build the pergola. I started by building up some posts using walls and fences, and then connected everything up with fence gates. After adding some rows of slabs and a few leaves, I filled in the rest of the space with all of the campfires that we made. Heading down to the ground, I added a few lanterns to light up the area. After that, I used glowberries, hanging roots, and weeping vines to give the cover of the pergola a natural look. To finish off the build, I created a bunch of seating using cherry stairs and scaffolding. The final detail I added was a flower pot to look like a cup and some acacia pressure plates to resemble, well, plates. And with that, I think this area is looking super awesome and super cozy. To create a bit of storytelling, I want to create a market stall beside the seating area where people living in the village can buy food and drinks. After crafting up some items, I made a trip over to our barn to get some milk buckets, which I then turned into a cake. After that, I got straight to work building up the market stall. I used dark oak wood for the frame, and then created a cover using mangrove and pale oak. To make it look like the cover is draping over the frame, I used hanging signs. Inside of the stall itself, I made a table, which I decorated with a flower pot and a couple chests. Beside that, I added some wine barrels, which I thought made sense considering we're right beside the vineyard we made last episode. The final detail I added was a flower pot, pressure plate, and of course the cake that we made. I feel like these two new builds we made pair so well together. I'm eager to keep developing this area, so I got to work getting various materials together to build some new farms. I ended up having almost everything that I need already, but I am going to need more dark oak saplings, so I added Fortune 3 and Unbreaking 3 to my hoe, and then harvested dark oak leaves to get tons of saplings. I'm also going to need more of the tall flowers, so I used bone meal to make more of those as well. And with that, we should have everything that we need. I started off by creating a border using oak leaves, and then dividing the area even further using spruce fences. To light up the farms, I placed down a few lanterns on top of the fences. We have 8 individual sections to fill with farms, so without wasting any time, I planted rose bushes and lilacs in the first one. For the next farm, I wanted to go for something a bit more practical, so I placed down some sand, and on top of that, I planted cactus. Moving over to the next farm, I started by digging out some trenches, which I then filled with water. After covering up all of the water with slabs, I hid them using moss carpet. And you might have already guessed by now, but this is going to be a sugarcane farm. Another practical farm I thought we could make is a cocoa bean farm, so I started by placing down some jungle logs and then planted my cocoa beans on them. For the next section, I thought it'd be fun to make a colorful nether-themed farm. I know all these farms aren't really functional, but I love the aesthetic it gives the area. Moving on to the next one, I started with a few rows of azalea bushes, and then I filled in the rest of the area with sweet berries. Since both dark oak and pale oak saplings need to be planted in a 2x2 space to grow, we can use them to resemble bushes by placing them strategically. And to add more variety to this section, I planted ferns alongside them and used bone meal to grow them into large ferns. For the final section, I used peonies and blue orchids to create another colorful flower farm. Some of the crops still need to grow in, but I'm absolutely loving how vibrant and alive this area feels now. Now that we have all these farms, I think it's only fitting to build a greenhouse to go along with them. So it's time for more resource gathering. I plan on using some copper for the build, so first things first, let's go place it outside so it can age down. Also, while we're out here, let's get distracted placing down some oak and birch saplings in order to regrow the forest we cut down earlier. After that, I got back to work getting some resources together, like stripped oak logs and yellow wool. We're also going to need a ton of glass, so I went over to a desert biome and gathered a bunch of sand up. I then went over to our blacksmith and harvested some lava from our lava farm, and then used our super smelter to turn all of the sand into glass. Once it was done smelting, I turned a few stacks of it into white stained glass. Of course, our copper is still aging, but besides that, we now have every single block that we need to build the greenhouse. I started by building the frame of the greenhouse using a combination of tough bricks, pale moss, cobblestone, stone bricks, and andesite. I then filled in the rest of the space with primarily glass blocks in order to allow a lot of sunlight into the structure. After that, I added some spruce trims around the windows and placed in a grass floor on the inside of the build. I still need to add the copper details, but it's taking forever to age, so while we continue to wait, let's get to work on adding some extra details to the farming region to really bring the area to life. The first thing I added was a few beehives near our wool farm. After that, I created a pumpkin patch near the market stall, which I detailed with red sand, candles, and sea pickles. I then built a small well in front of our villager trading hall, as I thought that was pretty fitting for a farming district. Since I've been working in this new area, I couldn't help but notice how plain the back of our windmill is, so to fix this, I added a simple window design, which seriously helped with breaking up the flat wall. I'm kind of addicted to adding raised planter boxes to my worlds lately, so I built some next to our greenhouse using podzol and pale oak trapdoors, and then I filled them in with red and brown mushrooms. Some of the copper is still aging, but whatever. I can't be bothered to wait anymore, so I went ahead and built 2 flower beds in front of our greenhouse using trapdoors, podzol, and azure bluets. And I also added in the door, which somehow hasn't aged down even once. I'd like to get started on the interior next, so I collected a few resources like azalea leaves, glowberries, and I even crafted some soul lanterns for the very first time in this world. And with that, we should have everything that we need. I want to grow some crops inside, so I started off by hiding some water sources underneath the walls. I also had to put a few water sources closer to the center of the room, so I hid them using spruce slabs with moss carpet on top of them. To create a really lush vibe inside of the greenhouse, I added a bunch of glowberries, weeping vines, and hanging roots on the ceiling. After that, I lit up the build with soul lanterns hanging from chains. I want to keep the ground primarily grass blocks, but to add just a bit of texture variation, I mixed in a little bit of moss. To add a nice detail by the entrance, I placed down 2 sunflowers and then created 2 plants using decorated pots and azalea leaves. I created a similar design at the back of the build, but switched this one up a bit by creating a table using dark oak stairs and a slab. I then decorated the table with a few flower pots. After that, I built a fun pathway down the middle of the greenhouse using pink petals. It's honestly such a vibe. To finish off the greenhouse, I decided to add a beetroot farm on both sides since I don't actually have any yet in this world. So after tilling the ground, I planted all 3 beetroot seeds that I currently have to my name. To get the farm filled in, I used bone meal to grow the beetroots right away, then harvested them with my Fortune 3 hoe. I repeated this process until both farms on either side of the greenhouse were completely filled in. And with that, I'm happy to call the greenhouse finished. Before we get started on our next build, I want to create a better axe, so I made a trip to the nether and mined quartz for XP. I even went full gamer mode and destroyed this ghast like a boss while I was at it. Jokes aside, once I was level 21, I made my way back to the overworld. I then started upgrading a brand new axe, aiming to make a perfect one. I added Unbreaking 3, Efficiency 5, and Mending. I totally forgot about Silk Touch though, so I made a trip over to our trading hall and purchased one from one of our librarians. But of course, as my luck goes, I don't have enough XP to add it to our axe. That means another trip to the nether to mine quartz again. I really need to make an XP farm soon because this is getting just a little bit ridiculous. After getting a bit more XP, I was finally able to add Silk Touch to our axe. It broke our anvil in the process though, so it better be worth it. Anyways, now that we have the perfect enchants on our axe, I decided to use my last netherite ingot to fully upgrade it. The last thing I want to build in this new farming region is a water tower, so I used my brand new axe to cut down some spruce trees as I need a decent amount of logs. Other than that, I already had all of the materials I needed already. For the block palette, I used primarily spruce and oak logs, and then for the actual tank itself, I used a combination of stripped dark oak logs and brown terracotta. It's a simple design, but it really fits the farm vibe. Of course, the build wouldn't be complete unless I create a path leading over to it though, so I spent a few minutes getting that in place. If you haven't seen one of my videos before, I like to tour everything we built at the end of my episodes. So to make sure our new area looks as polished as possible, I spent some time bone mealing any spots that felt a bit plain, and added a few flower patches to bring more color and life to the area. I feel like this especially helped with the custom terrain we built, as it made it look a lot more natural. But with that done, I think we're finally ready to tour this new region of our island. I thought we'd start the tour in our starter house, as I also want to take a minute to update our map before we get too carried away. I'm seriously so excited for this because we made so many major changes in this episode. So without stalling any further, let's grab this map and we can see, holy cow, just look how different it is. That is so sick to see on the map like that. Let's also take down this map and update it as well. With our maps now updated, you can see just how much stuff we did in this episode. I especially love seeing all this terraforming with the boulders that we made. It looks really cool from a bird's eye perspective like this. Another thing I want to do before we get too carried away in our tour is name the horses that we tamed last episode. The first horse I named Friday, which I thought was pretty fun, since it's actually the answer to the riddle that I gave all of you. The second horse I named Ginger, which was recommended by Cloudy, so thank you very much for that name idea. With those side missions completed, let's finally go take a look at everything that we built in this episode. And almost right away, we're approaching one of my favorite views on the entire island. This area where we have our custom trees alongside all of our sunflowers is honestly just so colorful and full of life. I absolutely love it. Next to our sunflower farm, we of course have our brand new pumpkin and melon farm. I'm definitely a lot happier with this one than the last one that we had. I think it just fits the area a lot better, and I really do love these alternating rows with the pumpkins and melons. I think it's super satisfying. Let's head up to the top of the hill, as this is where the majority of our new builds are. We of course have more custom trees up here, which are looking absolutely awesome. And then on the other side of those, we have this wall that we built. I really like the natural vibe that it has since we used azalea bushes. I think it really fits the area well. Speaking of wells, that's exactly what we built at the end of the pathway over here. It's a pretty simple design, but I think it fits the area nicely, and it's also pretty convenient to have an infinite water source nearby. Heading further into the farming region, we of course have all these different sections that we filled with a bunch of different farms. So over here we have our sugarcane along with our cocoa bean farm, and then on this side we have our flower farm along with our cactus farm. And then heading further down, we have our nether themed one on this side. And on the opposite side of that, we have our sweet berries along with our azalea bushes. And then our last sections are filled with, more flowers. And on this side, we have our large ferns along with some saplings to kind of look like some small bushes. But anyways, let's head over and check out our wool farm. It's actually been a while since I've been in here since we did all of that terraforming. I'm actually pretty curious how much wool is in this chest. Okay, so it's completely full, so I'm gonna have to empty that out later, but anyways, let's continue our tour. If we head further down our path and take a right here, we of course have our greenhouse, which is looking absolutely awesome. And next to that, we have our water tower, which I know doesn't really serve any practical function, but I think it looks cool and fits the area well. But let's go take a look inside the greenhouse. I think it's gonna look pretty cool with the shaders on, which yeah, it does. But one of my favorite things about this build was the pathway down the middle using the pink petals. I think it fits the greenhouse vibe perfectly and also just adds a lot of color into the build. And then of course we have our beetroot farms on either side, which I think look pretty nice, especially with the hanging roots and stuff coming from the ceiling. I just wanted it to feel really green in here and full of life, which I think it does. Heading further down the path in the opposite direction leads us over to our market stall as well as our pergola. I think this is one of my favorite market stalls that I've ever made. I especially love the hanging signs, and I'm also glad we added some wine barrels, which added some really nice storytelling considering it's right beside our vineyard. Right next to our market stall is our pergola. This thing is super cozy. I can just imagine myself, sitting on one of these chairs, enjoying a nice piece of cake. It just sounds like such a vibe. I think that pretty much covers everything that we built. We of course did all that terraforming, which took forever, but I think it was definitely worth it, and it's really going to help with our future expansions kind of on the other side of our farming district here. This was also a super productive episode because we now have full netherite armor, which is absolutely awesome. Just ignore my inventory. There was a chicken where I didn't want there to be a chicken, but anyways, we also almost have full netherite tools, which is super sweet. I think we'll definitely get that in the next episode, and I'm also hoping to set up an XP farm soon because that's really going to help with getting our armor and tools even better. But with that, thank you so much for watching this episode of my Hardcore Let's Play series. As always, if you want to explore this world for yourself, consider supporting me by getting the world to download on my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and happy building!